Every spring, gardeners make the same mistake. They buy seeds, start over, work all season, then winter kills everything. And next year, they do it again. But some plants don't play by those rules. You plant them once and they keep feeding you for years, sometimes decades. No replanting, no starting from zero, no wasting another season. Today we're counting down 11 forgotten perennial food plants that can turn one planting into harvests for 10, 20, even 30 years. And number 1 may already be growing in someone's garden right now, without them knowing what it really is. Kicking off our countdown at number 11 is a plant most gardeners walk past without a second look. It is called sweet Cicely, and once you understand what it does, you may wonder why it ever disappeared from our gardens. Every part of this plant is edible: the feathery leaves, the thick roots under the soil, even the seeds, and all of it carries a warm, sweet anise flavor, like a soft hint of licorice drifting through the garden on a cool spring morning. But this is what made sweet Cicely famous for centuries. If you have ever tasted rhubarb or gooseberries and winced at how much sugar they need, this plant is the answer. The natural oils in its leaves soften sharp acidity so well that cooks across Europe used it for generations to reduce sugar in tart recipes. For anyone trying to cut back on sugar today, that one quality makes sweet Cicely worth planting. And it does something else most vegetables refuse to do. It grows happily in shade. While other crops struggle, sweet Cicely sends down a deep taproot, reaching water and minerals far below the surface. That is why it returns every spring, bigger and more generous than before. One warning: sow fresh seeds in autumn. Leave them outside through winter. The cold is what wakes them up. Plant sweet Cicely once, and it can keep sweetening your cooking for decades. Coming in at number 10 is one of the strangest plants on this entire list. It is called the Egyptian walking onion, and once you hear what it does, you will never forget it. This onion walks. Not fast, not in a way you notice overnight, but across a season it slowly moves through your garden on its own. Here is how. Instead of growing flowers at the top of its stalks like most plants, it grows clusters of tiny onion bulbs. As those bulbs get heavier, the stalk bends toward the ground. Then the moment those little bulbs touch soil, they root, and a brand new plant begins growing several feet away from the mother plant. Season after season, it keeps moving, keeps spreading, keeps planting itself without your help. This plant was so remarkable that a Ming Dynasty prince recorded it back in 1406, over 600 years ago. He listed it in a famine relief herbal as one of the most dependable food crops a family could keep, and it can survive temperatures down to -40 degrees. That is not a mistake. Every part is edible. The green tops work like spring onions, the underground bulb cooks like a regular onion, and the top bulbils have a strong onion garlic flavor, perfect for pickling. Plant it once, watch it walk, harvest it forever. Sitting at number 9 is a plant with a name that sounds like it escaped from a fairy tale. Good King Henry. And its story is just as extraordinary as the name. This plant has been feeding families since the Middle Ages. Pollen records have found it at Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Roman archaeological sites across Europe. Think about that. Civilizations rose, wars were fought, kingdoms disappeared, and good King Henry kept growing quietly in someone's garden, producing food, returning every spring, asking for almost nothing. Most leafy vegetables are fragile. They bolt in heat, collapse in cold, demand perfect conditions, and when the weather turns against them, they give up. Good King Henry follows a different playbook. It tolerates temperatures down to -20 degrees, it grows in full sun, it grows in deep shade, and it can handle soils that would defeat almost any ordinary vegetable. But the harvest is what makes it special. In early spring, the young leaves come up as a rich spinach substitute, full of iron. A little later, tender shoots push through the soil. Peel them, and you can prepare them like asparagus. Then come the flower buds, which can be steamed as a gourmet vegetable. Even the seeds are edible, soaked overnight and ground into flour for baking. One plant, 4 different harvests, for decades. And here's the part that makes it practical. About 30 established plants can supply a family of 4 with regular harvests, from one planting that never needs replacing. So there we have it, our first 3 entries: a sugar-softening plant for shade, an onion that walks across the garden by itself, and an ancient leafy vegetable that has fed families since before the Roman Empire. Now we are breaking into the top 8. But before we go further, I want to know something. Which plant has surprised you the most so far? Was it sweet Cicely, reducing sugar naturally in tart recipes? Was it the Egyptian walking onion, planting itself for over 600 years? Or was it good King Henry, giving 4 different harvests from one single plant? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Because from here the list gets much stronger. The plants coming next are tougher, more productive, more dependable, and in some cases so forgotten that even experienced gardeners have never heard their names. These are not plants that merely survive difficult conditions. Some of them seem to prefer it, and that is where this countdown starts getting serious. Let's keep going. Coming in at number 8 is a plant that makes experienced gardeners stop and ask the same question. What on earth is that? It is called Lovage, and it grows big, nearly 6 feet tall from a single crown. A towering, magnificent plant that bursts from the ground every spring like it has something to prove. And honestly, it does. Because most people who cook have spent money on celery again and again. Celery that wilts in the fridge. Celery that must be replanted every season. Celery that needs perfect conditions just to survive. Lovage laughs at all of that. It gives you that same celery flavor, but deeper, richer, stronger, more powerful than the supermarket stalks most of us are used to. One handful of Lovage leaves can flavor an entire pot of soup. A few stems can change a stew in a way ordinary celery never could, and every part is useful. Fresh leaves from late winter through autumn. Stems you can blanch and use like celery stalks. Seeds that work as a warm baking spice, and older roots that give a rich, savory, broth-like flavor when grated or cooked. But here is the trick experienced growers swear by. Cut the whole plant right down to the ground in midsummer. It sounds brutal, but within weeks, fresh tender leaves burst back from the crown. So you do not get 1 harvest, you get 2. Plant Lovage once, and your celery bill may disappear forever. Landing at number 7 is a plant that was once treated like a luxury vegetable across Europe. The wealthy paid good money for it. Ordinary gardeners dreamed of growing it. Today, most people have never even heard its name. It is called sea kale, and it is extraordinary. This plant evolved on the rocky, salt-battered coastlines of Europe. Crashing waves, freezing winds, sandy soil with almost no nutrients. Most vegetables would fail quickly in those conditions. Sea kale did not fail. It thrived. It drove a deep, permanent taproot down through rocks and sand, then held on. And that same toughness is what makes it so valuable in a garden. But the harvest is the real surprise. In early spring, before the leaves fully open, gardeners cover the emerging shoots with a dark bucket to block out the light. That process is called blanching, and it produces crisp, tender, pale stalks with a delicate, nutty flavor, remarkably close to asparagus. Later in the season, the flower buds appear. Sweet, mild, cooked just like sprouting broccoli. Even the young leaves can be eaten raw or cooked like spinach. 1 plant, 3 completely different harvests in 1 season. And every spring it returns from the same deep root for decades without needing to be planted again every single year. It is also genuinely beautiful. Blue-green leaves, clouds of delicate white flowers. Sea kale earns its place twice, on your plate and in your garden. Coming in at number 6 is a plant researchers have described in 2 simple words. Virtually indestructible. It is called Turkish Rocket, and that description is not exaggeration. Most vegetables come with demands: the right soil, the right sun, consistent watering, protection from pests. Get one thing wrong and the harvest suffers. Turkish Rocket does not work like that. It grows in sandy soil. It grows in clay soil. It grows in full sun. It grows in dappled shade. It survives drought. It outgrows weeds. It laughs at neglect. Once this plant is established in your garden, Almost nothing can stop it. It belongs to the same family as kale and broccoli, and like them, it gives generous harvests of edible leaves and flower buds. The young leaves have a mild cabbage flavor that turns tender when cooked. The flower buds, harvested just before they open in early summer, are sweet, mild, and prepared exactly like broccoli. A perennial broccoli that comes back every year without planting another seed. And here's what makes it especially practical for older gardeners. You can take small root cuttings during the growing season and grow entirely new plants from them. It does not harm the parent plant. The remaining roots simply regrow and keep producing. Tough, generous, almost forgotten. Turkish Rocket deserves a place in every garden. We are now entering the top 5. And everything we have covered so far has been impressive. A sugar-softening herb, a self-walking onion, a medieval survivor, a towering celery replacement, a coastal luxury vegetable, and a broccoli-like plant that is almost impossible to kill. But these final 5 are in a different league. These are the heavyweights, the plants that do not just produce food for a few years. They build entire food systems that grow stronger, larger, and more abundant with every passing decade. The returns are bigger, the stories are deeper. And number 1, waiting at the very top of this list, is considered by experienced permaculture growers to be one of the greatest long-term investments any gardener can make. Let's count down the Elite 5. Kicking off our elite top 5 is a plant that may stop gardeners in their tracks. Because there's a good chance you already have it growing in your garden right now. You just never knew you could eat it. It is called Hosta. Most people know Hosta as a beautiful, shade-loving ornamental. The plant with big decorative leaves that fills dark corners of the garden where almost nothing else grows. Gardeners spend good money on them every year just for how they look. But in Japan, where Hosta originally comes from, this plant has been eaten as a traditional vegetable for centuries. The Japanese call it juboshi. And every spring, as the soil warms, Hosta sends up tightly rolled spear-like shoots from the ground. Harvest those shoots young and tender, and they cook up with a crisp texture and a mild, gentle flavor compared to asparagus. But the real power of Hosta is the shade. The same shade that makes those corners useless for most food crops is exactly where Hosta performs best. Under trees, along north-facing fences, beside walls that get no direct sun. Hosta fills those spaces productively, beautifully, year after year, decade after decade, from the same crown. You may have been walking past free food in your own garden for years without realizing it. At number 4, we have a plant that can change how you see a food garden. It is called the Siberian Pea Shrub, and the numbers behind it are almost hard to believe. This plant comes from the frozen wilderness of Siberia and Mongolia, places where winter drops to -30 degrees, where the wind keeps blowing, where the soil is poor, dry, and unforgiving. Most food plants would struggle there. This shrub was born for it. In your garden, it grows into a large, beautiful shrub. Every summer, it produces small pods. Inside those pods are tiny lentil-sized seeds. And here's the number that stops people cold. Those seeds contain 36% protein. To put that in perspective, beef contains roughly 26% protein. So this forgotten shrub, growing quietly in your garden, producing seeds every summer without replanting, fertilizing, or heavy maintenance, can deliver more protein per gram than meat. The seeds have a mild, simple flavor. Cook them like lentils, add them to stews, or dry them and grind them into high-protein flour. But the harvest is only half the story. Its roots fix nitrogen directly from the air, feeding the soil around it without one bag of fertilizer, one shrub, decades of harvests, and it improves your entire garden while it grows. At number 3, we have perhaps the most unknown plant on this entire list. Most gardeners have never heard its name. Most garden centers have never stocked it. And yet when people finally discover it, they almost always ask the same question. Why did nobody tell me about this sooner? It is called Hablitzia, or Caucasian spinach, and it comes from the deep mountain ravines of the Caucasus region. Wild, ancient forests where light barely touches the ground and winters are brutal. That is where Hablitzia learned its greatest trick. It thrives in deep shade, not partial shade, not a few hours of morning sun. Deep shade, the kind of dark, difficult corner where almost every food crop gives up. While other vegetables beg for sunlight, Hablitzia quietly climbs, up trellises, along fences, through shrubs. And as it climbs, it produces a steady supply of mild, tender, heart-shaped leaves from early spring until winter arrives. Those leaves are genuinely delicious. No bitterness, no sharpness, no strange flavor you have to cook out. Just soft, mild, nutritious greens packed with vitamins A and C. Use them fresh in salads, cook them into soups, or scatter them across homemade pizza straight from the garden. It can survive below -20 degrees, and every spring it comes back without fail. A climbing perennial spinach that feeds you from the shadows for decades. There's truly nothing else like it. At number 2, we have a plant with a history that can genuinely move you. It is called the American groundnut. And for thousands of years, Native American peoples across North America depended on it as one of their most important food sources. Archaeologists have found it growing around ancient campsites across the continent. A quiet, faithful companion to generations of people who understood something about this plant that modern gardeners almost forgot. Above ground, it grows as a climbing vine. Beautiful purple-brown flowers, a faint scent of violets, a soft, ornamental look. But the real harvest is hiding underground. Strung along its roots like beads on a necklace, American groundnut produces clusters of protein-rich tubers that can genuinely surprise you. Those tubers contain 17% protein. That is more than 3 times the protein of a potato. Cook them thoroughly, and they develop a sweet, nutty, flowery flavor that has scored exceptionally well in taste trials. And if you leave the tubers undisturbed for 2 to 3 years before harvesting, the yields can become truly extraordinary. But this plant does more than feed you. It also fixes nitrogen into the soil as it grows. It survives temperatures down to -40 degrees. And once established, it asks for very little. A vine that feeds you, improves your soil, and keeps returning for decades from the same roots. The Native Americans knew something we forgot. It is time to remember it. Finally, taking the crown at number 1 is Skirret, the sugar root. And it may be the perfect example of everything this video has been building toward. This plant was once loved across Europe. The Dutch even named it suikerwortel, meaning sugar root. Gardeners from Scotland to Germany grew Skirret for centuries as one of their most dependable harvests. Then modern agriculture arrived. Supermarkets filled with cheap vegetables, and Skirret quietly disappeared. But those old gardeners knew something we forgot. Plant Skirret once, and it returns every spring from the same crown. Each year, the cluster of sweet white roots grows larger. Each year, the harvest gets bigger, and the flavor, sweet, nutty, somewhere between carrot and parsnip, becomes richer with age instead of fading. It does ask for patience in the first year, but by year 3, a mature Skirret crown rewards that patience with an abundance annual vegetables cannot match. 30 established plants can supply a family of 4. Forever. No replanting, no starting over, no wasted seasons. Just sweetness, returning faithfully every spring for as long as you tend it. The gardening world taught us to start from scratch every season. Buy seeds, replant, begin again. But every plant on this list tells a different story. A story about patience, about roots that go deep, about harvests that grow stronger over decades instead of disappearing after one season. You do not have to keep starting over. So now, out of all 11 plants we covered today, which one would you actually plant first? Sweet Cicely? Hosta? American groundnut? Or the forgotten sugar root itself, Skirret? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video changed how you see your garden, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.